Welcome back everyone to the channel, and today I'd like to start with saying congratulations to Kemi Badenoch, who is now the leader of the Conservative Party and the leader of the official opposition. She got around 53,000 votes, beating Robert Jenrick by around 12,000 votes. And in a victory speech, she vowed to change the Conservative Party for good and hinted at giving Robert Jenrick a senior role within the new formed shadow cabinet that she'll have to make. But there was one person who didn't believe much will change, and that is of course the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. So please take a look at what Farage had to say shortly after Kemi Badenoch became leader of the Tories.
So as projected, and indeed delivered, Kemi Badenoch is the leader of His Majesty's loyal opposition, which means the Conservative Party have turned their backs on the idea of leaving the ECHR because that's what Jenrick stood for. What you're going to get with Kemi Badenoch is more of the same. Pretty much exactly the same as the last 14 years. I've got to tell you, one thing they don't understand, it isn't about the individuals, the Conservative brand is broken.
So there we see Nigel Farage make claims that Kemi Badenoch will not change the Conservative Party, she will not leave the European Court of Human Rights, and that nothing will change because the brand of the Conservative Party is dead. And he seems to hint at his preferred person would have been Robert Jenrick, because Robert Jenrick obviously said he would leave the European Court of Human Rights. Now, for anybody that doesn't know, the reason that this is such a hot topic is when the UK wants to deport illegal migrants who've come over here via boat, for instance, the European Court of Human Rights has the power to override, and has done, what the UK government wants to do. So a lot of people, when we left the EU through Brexit, thought that that would be automatic, but of course it wasn't. So Kemi Badenoch has been saying things like we need to work with them, we need to change, and that we wouldn't actually be able to deport anybody, or would be able to deport anybody, regardless of whether we're a member. She says there's other problems that need solving, and that being a member of the ECHR makes no difference to whether we can or can't. But what do you think with Kemi Badenoch? Because some of the stuff that Kemi Badenoch says when she talks about things like men are men and women are women, and she doesn't believe in different to any more genders than the two that we're born with, where the powers to be in the mainstream media and the left at the moment tell us that sex and gender are two different things. So I certainly agree with Kemi Badenoch on topics like that. But the ECHR is a bit of a sticking point for me, and it makes you wonder if we're going to have more of a David Cameron approach with Kemi, where we say we're going to do a deal with the European Union, we're going to work with the European if elected. I always like a politician having a one way or the other rather than sitting on the fence. Even if I don't necessarily agree with that, you know exactly where they stand. Now, one of the big problems I see for Kemi is the fact that the Conservative Party is now made up far more of one nation Conservative MPs. MPs who see themselves on the centre-left rather than what they call the centre-right. For anyone who watches this channel, they know that I don't believe in centre and centre-right. I think it comes down to common sense. But for argument's sake and to explain it easier, you get the Conservative MPs like David Cameron, who are to the centre, slightly to the left, and then you get more conservative people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who would describe himself as centre-right. Now, before the general election, many Conservatives followed that same type of belief system as Kemi Badenoch and Jacob Rees-Mogg and others. I was going to say Robert Jenrick, that's why I stuttered a bit, but then I remembered that Robert Jenrick actually was more like David Cameron before the election leadership race. But when the election, which has just passed, gave the results, the Conservative MPs, which was more like-minded to Kemi, had lost the seats, a majority of them, and even though they was more popular than the One Nations, a lot of them had lost the seats because of the vote split with the popular Reform candidates. So that then left around two-thirds of the Conservative Party, with only 120 MPs, being very dominated by people who do not share Kemi's views or the views that Robert claimed he had. So my worry for Kemi Badenoch is, as the election draws nearer, she'll come out with more controversial topics well, she'll probably be asked about them and give answers, and then the MPs, the Conservative MPs, I think, will stab her in the back and will get rid of her. Or the other thing that will happen is Kemi Badenoch isn't centre-right, and now she's the leader, she will pander to all the One Nation Conservatives. But it's going to be interesting to see. And the last thing I want to talk about is, how do people feel this will affect Reform UK's vote? I think you will see a spike. I think Reform will lose support. I certainly will carry on supporting the Reform Party, but I think there will be a drop in support for him. And then as Kemi Badenoch goes along and Farage points stuff out that she says she supports or doesn't support, I think that support will come back to the Reform Party. But it's definitely going to take some type of dip. Now, I believe the best way for the Reform Party to counter this is to keep attacking the Labour Party and taking Labour voters. That surely is the way forward now, because the amount of voters they have already took off the Conservative Party. But what will be interesting is, if Kemi Badenoch is good to her word and she really believes in the stuff she says she believes in, by the ECHR, she isn't that different than Nigel Farage, which is striking when you take into fact that she said she would not have Nigel Farage in the Conservative Party and doesn't think he's a serious leader, when they basically share the same policies. So it's going to be very interesting on the way to seeing how things go forward. And please comment, let me know your thoughts. Do you think Kemi will last? Do you think this will affect the Reform vote? And thank you all for watching, and please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.